Hello and welcome to Strange Stories. It's great to have you here. We are all about sharing stories of near-death experiences from around the world in the hopes of bringing some light and inspiration to your day. Our daily videos offer a glimpse into what lies beyond this life, and we believe that they can help us all appreciate the gift of life a little bit more. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to grow. And to our returning viewers, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you with us again. So go ahead, grab a cozy blanket, get comfy, and join us for today's incredible near-death experience story.
We didn't need to sit because we're now in spirit form, but they showed me the past in the Hall of Events. They showed me the gift. They showed me what would happen in the future, and it was spectacular. They took me back in time before my birth. They showed me things that had nothing to do with me, such as the Korean War in the early 1950s. I was born in the early 1952. I have relatives who served in the war, so perhaps they showed me that as a result of that. They did, however, show me events. These were one-of-a-kind events that affected everyone. They showed me events that led all the way to the top, all the way to the top. They showed me the shooting of John F. Kennedy. They showed me the shooting of Martin Luther King. They showed me all the way up to my near-death experience, but they took me beyond. The following event they showed me was 9/11. Because I'm from New York, I remember having many friends who worked in those buildings. And I recall that when they showed me these events, it was back in shape. We were actually on the move. It was like being in a computer, on a screen, or seeing the old flickering effects in movies. It was flickering, but at incredible, phenomenal speeds. Then it would come to a halt. So it would lead us to this event, that event, and so on. However, they came to an end at 9/11, and now the building is collapsing around us, and I began to run. I wasn't sure if I was running towards the building or not when Peter grabbed my arm. "Bill, this is your future," he said. "There will be no action." And I just stood there amazed because there was no debris. I had no sensations. And I mentioned that I have friends, I have acquaintances in that building. At the time, I was overcome with emotion. And then we were abducted once more. So it was kind of like a ride. It was like going on a journey, and it was incredible. We were kidnapped, and I believe we were taken to Baghdad because I knew I was in the Middle East because of the way people dressed. And bombs were going off all around us. Again, I noticed the bombs while we were there, and I guess it was just instinct. But I recall running again, and he told me, "Bill, you don't have to run. You're not required to run." And then they take me. They take me to the future which I believe is now. I mean, it's gotten to the point where families no longer communicate with one another. What is it all about? Politics? It makes no sense. We're supposed to be loving people who help other people through service. This is one of the most crucial points. In a moment, I'll get to these principles of enlightenment. However, one of the enlightenment principles is service. While serving, our being and spirit grow, and they showed me two future paths. They led me down a destructive and horrible path. Then, they showed me a path that seemed almost utopian. It was stunning. So I believe we have some important decisions to make in the world today. People must sit and converse together. People need to think about feeding hungry people around the world rather than worrying about time wars or anything else. It is extremely important because we do not want to end up as a society. And this is happening all over the world. I mean, we don't want to become a society like the one we depicted in Mad Max. We want to live on the other side, where it's utopia, where people do and help and work and love and pass on the good they've received. We don't have to be in a situation where we have to fight for safe drinking water and food. You know, it's possible that people will take and take and take and take from the earth, but they will not replace what they take. So we could get to a point where our nourishment comes from Mother Earth's veins, rivers, nostrils, and the oxygen we breathe. This is extremely important. If my new book has taught me anything, it is that people must come together in some way. But having that and feeling that is crucial. What happened to the Hall of Events at this point? Then everything would just vanish at once. And then we were on our way again. So we've moved on from the Hall of Events. They get me to a final plateau. And these lovely, magnificent, wise angels are all around me, and they're explaining things to me that are far beyond comprehension. They're explaining that I had one angel approach me with great knowledge and a number system, and I'd see these figures. He illustrated it. It was like floating crystals floating down and lighting up, and the lovely number sequences. He stated that these figures are crucial. He pointed out even numbers like 3, 6, and 9. Everything is in multiples of 108. For some reason, our universe appears to revolve around this number. The 3s, 6s, and 9s are also significant, because if you combine that number with the 108 number, you get the 18, 1-8 that I saw up there, because all zeros are always dropped when looking at a life path number. However, the physical number is 18. When you take 108 and divide it by 6, you get the number 18. These are numbers that have existed for tens of thousands of years. Our universe is built on mathematical and musical principles. This 108 is so significant that, as I previously stated, dividing it by 6 yields the number 18. 3 times 6 equals 18. Well, Nikola Tesla had those figures as well, but these are the universe's numbers. These are angelic digits. They've been around for a very long time. So 108 divided by 6 equals 18. 3 times 6 equals 18. 3 plus 6 equals 9. 9 is the result of 18 divided by 2. 9 minus 3 equals 6. The numbers 3, 6, and 9 fit everything. The 108 is significant because it represents the actual distance between our moon and our planet. When you divide the diameter of the moon by its distance from the Earth, you get 108. It's 108 if you take the diameter of the Earth and divide it by the distance to the Sun, which is 93 million miles. So there's something to these figures, and I believe the 3, 6, and 9 are related to that. But now, I'll get to the important stuff. The essential components of these great master spirit angels are the 9 principles of enlightenment. These 9 principles, if violated, have the potential to permanently alter our world. There are several principles. There are intuitional principles. There are choice principles. These principles are oversimplified. They're straightforward. It consists of 9 fundamental principles, which I refer to as the laws of the universe. The first principle is that no one should ever take another person's life. The reasoning for this is not as straightforward as we might think. Of course, this is incorrect, and it does not work in the spirit world. It simply does not happen. However, the principle of taking someone's life is crucial. It's also critical to never take your own life because you need to live your life for as long as possible. You must apply as many of the lessons as you can learn on a daily basis. But the principle of taking someone's life is that you never know what that person's grandson or granddaughter might have accomplished. They could have been someone with a cancer cure. And the first principle of the law of enlightenment is not to take a life. That's the first. Second, I'd argue that your intuition is the most important principle to follow while you're alive. If we listen to our intuition, we will always have someone on our shoulder speaking to us. Also, if you have a bad feeling about something, pay attention to it. Recognize that it could be a message from your guardians. I recall being kidnapped once. My ex-wife and I were kidnapped, physically kidnapped, while on a business trip to Thailand. When I arrived at the airport, I did what I was supposed to do. I used to travel all over the country to attend trade shows, and I used to travel the world buying inventory. That is why it is critical that we listen to our intuitions, as these are messages from our guides. Our guides accompany us throughout our lives, and it's just one of the most important principles. Then, there are love principles, choice principles, and lesson principles, and it's just fantastic. It's covered in my book. And now, after they've explained all 9 principles to me, there's I'd like to tell you about the 9th principle. The understanding of all 9 principles is the 9th level of enlightenment. However, the 9th principle is about Mother Earth. That's what we were discussing earlier. If we keep taking and taking and taking and not replacing, I believe in the old adage about raising forests to replace them. Stuff like that. We require both oxygen and water. We cannot continue to pollute our environment, and we must look after those who are in need. As a result, we should be doing humanitarian work. We should give the gift of our love. Our love should be a primary goal here. So after explaining all of the principles to me, this beautiful, beautiful spirit said to me that I had to return. So in the number sequence, I have to go back for 1 minute. They explain my alert system and number sequence in the number sequence. This was my alert system, number 66. This was when the angels attempted to contact me, and I'd see these, a number that I'd been familiar with my entire life. On some days, the number 66 would appear in front of me with everything. I'd look up out of nowhere. I'm at exit 66, and I'm checking my watch. I'm 6 minutes past 6. I see a billboard with the number 66 on it. That, they explained, was my alert system, and I had to pay close attention to that because, for better or worse, something big or unusual was about to happen. It didn't have to be bad. With 66, there have been some major and beautiful events. So let's go back to the beginning. This young, beautiful spirit approaches me and says, "You understand the 9 principles of enlightenment. You must come back." I remember almost fighting. I didn't want to leave. I had a lot of love. On the other side, all I felt and saw was love. It was an experience that cannot be described in this body. The affection is overwhelming. You don't want to leave once you've arrived. "You must learn," she said, and I was pleading and begging. "I'd like to stay. I'd like to stay. Please do not return me." "Dad, you must return," she said for the 3rd time. I continued to beg. The father thing went right over my head. At the time, I didn't even realize it. "I am 6 of 6, she said. "You must come back." That was the final one. Then I'm pulled back into this vortex. It wasn't as pleasant as going. It was pulling me back at breakneck speed, and I was floating around like a rag doll. And I remember waking up at that precise moment. There was no air in my body, so I went that route. I couldn't take a breath. At the time, the only thing moving in my entire body was my throat, and all I was doing was trying to get some air into my lungs. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel tingles in my arms and legs. And now I'm reaching for the phone. I believe I dialed 0. I don't believe it was 911. I believe I dialed 0 at the hotel, and they took it up. I explained that I needed to go to the hospital, and I made it to the hospital. I'm not sure if they came back and took me or if my coworker next door did. At the time, I was completely disoriented. Years had passed, but to explain where the important number system came in. My daughter was born in June of 2000 on the 6th day of the 6th month. 66. That's a number I'll remember for the rest of my life. She was born 6 years later on June 6th in the year 2000. That's the end of the story. One more point is critical. Following that, I went to see my doctor. I didn't tell anyone about it when I got home. I had no idea what a near-death experience was. I didn't hear the words at all, and my wife told me that I needed to see a doctor because she trusted me, and I have an appointment with him. This doctor has been with me since I was in my early 20s when I was working as a paramedic in Miami, and I was 42 years old at the time. In 94, I'm 42, and he said to me when I get in the office, "What's ailing you? What's causing you pain?" I explained I was only here for an annual checkup. At the time, nothing was physically bothering me, and he gives me everything, including blood workups and everything else. And I asked if I could speak with you, Dr. Vasquez, and he responds, "Of course." "Is it something personal?" he asks. "Yes," I replied. "So follow me," he says. We went back to his personal office. We sat down, and I just let everything out. After I finished talking to Dr. Vasquez, he stood there for about 30 seconds, and he just said to me, "Bill, I don't want you to be nervous, but you just told me the same exact story that 7 of my patients told me prior. People that died in the hospital, people that died outside the hospital, people that died in their homes." But he said very similar story. He says, "I think what you had was a near-death experience." And I said, "What's that?" "Well," he said, "let me do one more test." So he took me back to the exam room. He hooked me up with all the electrical cardiogram, and he took a long electrical cardiogram on me. And back those times, it was all on the paper. And he was going through the paper and going through the paper and going through the paper. And he turns up to me and he says, "Bill, when did you have your heart attack?" I said, "Dr. Vasquez, I had never had a heart attack." "Well," he says, "well, it sure looks like you had a heart attack." And he said, "Bill, A near-death experience is when somebody dies and they come back. And luckily, I'm lucky. I'm lucky I had a doctor like that because a lot of doctors had no belief in that. But for some reason he did. And he explained it to me and he said to me, he told me at that moment, he told me to read a book by the name Saved by the Light. So I read it. I read a couple other books and the funniest thing, two of the books that I read, the person themselves, when they got to heaven, said the same thing I did. I'm home. I've arrived home. And they used the same words. Thank God I'm finally home. And that was amazing. That's the end of the story. Thank you.